Making a Gunna Type Beat is P. Yo, what's up? Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a beat for Gunna or another artist like Lil Got It that's been made by the producer Wheezy. Alright, so to start I have two flute sounds playing the same pattern. The first one is out of Arcade. Arcade 2.0 is really cool because you can go into a line like Passport, and instead of going into their sampler kits and having to like mess around with an actual sample, what you can do is go into note kits, and then this is essentially just a bunch of different one-shots you can use. So I'm using Earthy Koala, and then I'm also using a sound out of Omnisphere called Flute Heavy. And for each of these, I kept the melody really light. This is what they sound like. Yeah, so I kept it really light, just something bouncy, lots of space in it. And then the next melodic thing I have is a mallet. This is just a one shot, and this is mirroring what the flutes are doing, except I added something on the downbeat. Whereas in the flutes, it's not there. So all three together sound like this. So in terms of mixing, what I did is I just took one flute layer, panned it to the left 30%, took the other one, panned it to the right 30%, and then made sure that they were coming through evenly through both channels. And in terms of like effects, all I did was EQ them. And then for the mallet, I EQ'd it, put on some reverb, and added RC20 just to give it a bit of texture. And then all three of these, I actually have them going to a melody bus, which I'll go over in a bit. The thing that gives them a lot of space is, generally speaking, I like to avoid using like a lot of wet effects on individual channels. I like to put them all together on a bus so that like your delays aren't fighting with each other. So I routed each one to a reverb bus where I have a completely wet signal going and an EQ. And then for the delay, I have Comeback Kid. This is one of my favorite delay plugins with an EQ, just to make sure that, you know, it's not doing too much. So the next thing I did was add two pads. I have the pads playing on the second beat instead of the first, so the melody hits and then the pad comes in, and it just helps create a little more space and add some bounce to the beat. So for this, I'm just having the root note and the fifth playing, but I inverted the root note. And then the other pad that's playing is just a one shot, and that's just kind of in there to add ambiance. But in terms of mixing those, the first pad I have on halftime, 25%. I have on an EQ, some fruity reverb, and super VHS with the mix turned down and the magic knob on. The other pad, I have it panning to the left and right. I have an EQ. I have initial reverse, RC20, and one knob wetter. Both of these get routed to the melody bus, which is the same bus that I have the flutes and the mallet on. I have both of the pads routed to the reverb. They're not routed to the delay because that could get real muddy and real messy really quickly. But I threw both of them over to the reverb just to, you know, add some space and make it sound cool. So I keep things pretty light in terms of the melody when I'm going for a Wheezy beat. You just kind of want to have everything doing its own thing at the right time. So with all of them playing at the same time, you get this. And without like the reverb and delay buses on, it would sound like this. So you can see they're not doing that much, but it's enough just to really like provide texture to the beat. Now that all the melodies are routed onto one bus, I'll show you guys what I put on the melody bus. To start, I have Effect Rack with the preset Basic Vintage Punch. Next, I have on Neutron 3 from Isotope with the Vintage Multiband preset. This is just an EQ and a multi-band compressor. And finally, I have Pro Q3. The reason why I have this EQ here is for the 808s actually. I have it going down at around 110 hertz, and the reason for this is 808s really start to sound good like around 100. So I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, the space is there in the melodies for the 808s to start to shine through. And that's the melodies. So I don't know about y'all, but for me, one of the hardest things to learn as a producer was to keep shit simple, but also have it be hot. I'd go to studio sessions and play beats for rappers, and I would get really good reactions like, oh damn bro, this shit's crazy. But they would never actually go and pick those beats. The beats they would end up picking were the ones that I personally didn't really like because they weren't like technically crazy beats, like on the technical side of the producing. They were always just kind of simple, and I didn't really think they were standouts, but those are the ones that artists would notice. So in terms of the drums for a beat that's Gunna or Wheezy inspired, keep shit simple. That's really what it comes down to. You just have to provide the pocket for the rapper to get into. During the hook section, this is it. It's not much. So in terms of the way I have the drum structured, it's just like during the hook section, it's just 2 8-bars. The first 8, it's really light. So I have the 808, the clap, the hi-hat, and the open hat. And then in the second 8 bars, I take away the open hat, change up the 808 slightly, and add in some more percussion. The 808 pattern is very simple. It's just this. And then in the switch up, all I'm doing is adding this little C right here. The clap, it's just straightforward. The hi-hat in the first 8 bars is just fill every 2 steps, right click, fill every 2 steps. And then I always like to randomize my hi-hats just to add a little more bounce. So if you're on Mac, Option R. I think Windows would be Alt R. But I turn off pattern, just increase the pan, fuck with the velocity a little bit, hit accept, and then that just adds a little bit of a groove to your hi-hat patterns. For the open hat, I have a little roll here at the bottom, followed by regular open hats, and they're just alternating in terms of panning. During the second 8 bar, I do switch up the hi-hat pattern a little bit, but all I did was add a little roll at the beginning. Yeah, that's really it. Just keep it light. In terms of mixing, on the 808, I have Ozone 9 exciter, just a multi-band exciter to warm it up, essentially. And I also have on Ozone 9 imager. So for the imager, I have everything that's below 140 hertz coming through as mono. 140 to 715, I have a little bit less mono. From 715 up until around 3000, I have that being the most stereo. And then, from 3000 up is slightly less stereo. This just really helps bring the 808 through the mix without it taking over. So it brings out a lot of the brighter aspects of the 808 and make the 808 sound nice, but it's not doing too much. I like to bus my 808 over because I can let this one clip a little bit, or I can let it get up into the more distorted frequencies and still pull that down in the overall mix. So if this were just going straight to the print, you would see that in the print track, it starts to become distorted. But if I route it to the 808 bus, it allows me to pull the volume down and keep the whole track from clipping, but still bring out a lot of the warmer harmonics that I want to shine through. And then honestly, for mixing my drums, I just keep that shit really simple. It's just like an EQ on everything. Except for my hi-hats, I put a little bit of a flanger on it just to add some texture. Kind of like the Alt-R trick, it's just a way of making the hi-hats more interesting without actually doing any real work. So I have all of the drums routed to a drum bus once again, and I'm running Neutron on it. I abuse the hell out of Neutron. This plugin is fantastic. I run the Essential Mix bus preset on almost all of my drums because what it does is it just sets a really nice EQ and a compressor and glues everything together. The drums are really simple. You gotta get the groove right, baby. You can see though, like, nothing's doing anything crazy or anything special, but when you take all the elements and put them together and kind of fill the pockets right where they need to be filled, that's how you start to get that kind of Wheezy, New Atlanta trap style. But now let's talk song structure. Something I noticed Wheezy really likes to do is just start the beat. Like, whether you're ready or not, we're starting. So at the intro, I have the flutes playing with a pad, 808s, and a hi-hat. Traditionally, a lot of people like to hold off on the 808s and wait until like the hook comes in to bring the 808s in to create the energy. But what I've noticed is start with the 808, just let the beat start. So for the intro, you keep things pretty light, and then at the hook, you just bring in a couple more elements. Like I mentioned earlier, I tend to have like 2 main sections in my hook. So the first 8 bars and then the second 8 bars. During the first 8 bars, I have all of the melodic elements playing, the flutes, the mallet, the pads, and then you keep the drums pretty light. So you go with just the 808, the clap, the hi-hat, and the open hat. Then in the second 8 bar of the hook, you take away one of the melodic elements. So in this case, pad 2, add some variation to the 808. In this case, it's literally just adding a C note and then bringing in your other percussion. And you can see, like, even without anything else going on the beat, at the end of the day, this is providing the bounce you need. So that's it for the intro and the hook. And next we get to the verse. During the verse section, that's when I let myself, get a little crazy. I switched up the mallet melody. So instead of being the basic one that the flute was, I went through and just added, some more chords and a couple different counter melodies in there. And this nice little bass line. And then while that's playing throughout the verse section, I do have the flutes going, but only as accent pieces. So you can see here at the start, I have the flutes not playing on the downbeat. So the mallets come through and then the flutes add to it. So yeah, during the verse section, I keep the flutes light, just use them in little pockets to add to it, have the pads going. And the 808 is honestly the biggest switch up because when you go from the hook to the verse, you want to do something to signal to the artist that, hey, it's time to switch up off of the hook. Instead of just having the really basic 808 pattern, we have a little more movement. So this is what it sounds like in the verse. The final thing I did was I also changed up the hi-hats a little bit, added in some rolls. I also added a bounce clap. So that's the verse section. Basically, you want to do like a bunch of really small changes that like guide the artist through the song. Overall, I just like to use a bunch of little dropouts and cuts to add more space in the beat. Like if someone's rapping during this section, you can see that just by removing the hi-hats, it opens up so much more energy. You cut that out just for a split second until the clap comes back in. It adds this kind of this breath or this pause. It's building up tension and release very subtly. So essentially with Wheezy type beats, I try to always be bringing things in and taking things out very subtly so that the energy is always evolving and it guides the artist through what they should be doing. But yeah, so going through and chopping up the beat just in little spaces really add like a layer of complexity to it without actually being that complex. It gives the artist time to breathe, it gives the beat time to breathe, and it creates more pockets. So yeah, that's how you make a Wheezy type beat. use some realistic elements, have a lot of space in your drums, try to create a nice bounce, and that's about it. That's how you make a Wheezy type beat. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial today. This is really the first time I've done anything like this, so I'd love to hear what you think about this type of content in the comments. If you want to see another type of beat breakdown, suggest something in the comments. I make a bunch of different type of beats. Wheezy has a big influence on my sound, but I make a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, so if you liked this video today, go ahead, leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you want to see in the future, and hope this helps. Peace.